The story of Fred Francis has been recounted many times for Kiwanians since his death in 1926. Called a recluse, hermit, eccentric, and other names, apt or not, Francis had a brilliant mechanical mind. But to think only of his inventions is too limiting. It's fair to say he was a brilliant man, recognized by friends as a deep thinker whose thoughts were worthy of hearing and heeding. I'm going to rely on one of Francis's close friends, Russell Trowell Neville, to give us perhaps a little different perspective on this genius of the Illinois prairie, written just 6 months before Francis died in December 1926. Just don't litter up his dooryard with papers and rubbish. Treat him somewhat after the fashion of the Golden Rule, and you'll find him a genial and kindly host, proud of the work of his hands, as he has every right to be, and you'll learn a lot of things from him too, if you heed his counsel. Those were the last words of an article written in 1926 by Russell T. Neville, Kewanee attorney, amateur photographer, and close friend of Fred Francis. Neville wrote about his dear friend after a visit with him at his home northeast of Kewanee, called Woodland Palace, 6 months before Francis died. Neville had known Francis for 25 to 30 years and had visited him 40 to 50 times since the death of Fred's wife in 1921. Francis had also visited Neville in his office in Kewanee many times. Reading Neville's story provides a little additional insight into Francis and why Francis Park exists today. Upon arriving that day at Francis's home, Neville described the pencil-written neat sign on the rough wooden gate to his friend's property. It read, "Well-bred folks ask permission." After entering what Neville described as the grove of majestic oak and hickory trees through a latched wicket, Neville read another posted sign. "Stop. Read this. Grounds are free for all who do right, and all such are welcome. Those who throw paper and rubbish on the ground, meddle with property, or let the kids do so, are hereby cordially invited to stay away." A smaller sign warned visitors, "Keep out of the ruts," a sign intended for those driving automobiles. Francis owned, as Neville reported, quite a bit of very pretty timberland surrounding his home, and to the east of his house stood a picturesque grove of trees used by many for picnicking. On the grounds, Neville observed the small log cabin Francis built to replicate the one in which he was born, in which he used logs from that old cabin to build the small one. Following the ornamental hedge to a grilled gate, Neville arrived at the yard of Woodland Palace, which he described as one of the most unique homes it has ever been our fortune to visit. It was still being built because Francis told him that he will continue working on it as long as he lives. Neville described the house as not only of odd design, but it has many interesting features of construction. Those features included the brick and stone home with a poured concrete roof over part of it. As Neville said, it is safe to say that he owns the only roof like this in the country. It also had, as Neville wrote, unique mechanical entry doors, an ingenious arrangement of ropes and pulleys and levers entirely too deep for a non-mechanical mind to fathom. It had an intricately constructed, elaborate chandelier and other ingenious devices, a clever fireplace, the glass-enclosed, domed room built for his late wife, Jeannie, which he wrote, "Mr. Francis built this glass room and tenderly nursed her for months, prolonging her life by his careful and loving attention." As he went up the stairs to the first floor, Neville saw Francis's diploma from the Illinois Industrial University, now the University of Illinois. Neville described a large frame filled with an abstruse mathematical calculation that occupied his mind for years, until Francis invented a new mathematics to solve it. According to Neville, it has always seemed that here was a man capable of supplying about every material need by his own efforts. If he were cast away on a desert island with a pop bottle, we'd expect him to have a magnifying glass, clothes, and everything else he needed by the time he was rescued. Neville remarked on Francis's different eating habits, which included using no condiments, and he also does not eat many of the foodstuffs we mostly depend on. The fruit he raises on his own place, preserved by his own hands, supplemented by nuts and fruits and some rough fodder he buys, are sufficient for this remarkable man. Neville described his friend as a hale, hearty man in his 70s, a striking figure with his long bushy beard and hair, his vigorous health and energy, the envy of many younger men. After graduating from the university in 1878, Francis had been employed by the Elgin Watch Company for years, and there was evidence of that in the house. Neville wrote, "We've seen some of the mechanical drawings and plates made by him at the watch company, and they are as perfect and delicate as any copper plate you ever saw." But Francis retired after he made enough to live on for the rest of his life. As he walked through the house again, Neville was reminded that Jeannie had died 5 years earlier, and Francis had since lived in his home alone. But Neville may have been most impressed by Francis as a deep student and thinker. He holds original ideas along many lines, and his speech is thought-provoking. You may not agree with some of his theories, but you'll admit that they are the result of much deep thought and study. Neville then divulged that, because the university held a special place in his heart, Francis was quite anxious that the Henry County alumni use a part of his grounds for picnic purposes. And, Neville continued, Francis has also made elaborate plans for the future use of his home when he was done with it, contemplating that it will be an art gallery and museum open to the public. Neville's story ended without anticipation of his friend's death. Neville later said that Francis knew that some people did not approve of his mode of living, but he was going to live his life as he chose. Fred Francis died on December 22, 1926. His death was originally found to be as the result of natural causes, and he was cremated according to the terms of his will. After cremation, however, evidence suggested that Francis had shot himself with a revolver found at the scene, along with a note which read in relevant part, "Hernia, could not stand the pain." While there was no change in the official finding of natural causes, most believed that Francis had killed himself because of the untreatable pain his infirmity caused him. In his will, Francis left all of his land and personal property to the city of Kewanee for use as a city park to be called Francis Park. Francis had included a number of stipulations which, if not met, would result in his estate going to the University of Illinois. All of the stipulations, however, were observed, and eventually Kewanee took possession of the land, Woodland Palace, and all of Francis's personal property. By 1930, an estimated 15,000 people were using the park annually. For the most part, the park remained unchanged, but in the 1960s there were a number of renovations made. In 1974, the Illinois State Historical Society designated Woodland Palace as an historical site. In 1975, Woodland Palace was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. As a kid in the 1950s, I vaguely remember my mom's side of the family holding pig roasts at Francis Park. The men would get up early, head to the park, start the fire, and then begin the spit roasting process. Although Fred Francis would not have joined the later feast, I'm sure he would have enjoyed seeing a large family using his land for a get-together. What's more, I'm sure he would have enjoyed regaling us with his thoughts on a panoply of topics. And perhaps we would have taken heed.